Let's talk defense at Big Ten Media Days. That's Mick Walker. I'm Spencer Holbrook. Mick, we said yesterday everything we needed to say that we want to learn about the Ohio State offense. Now we're going to talk about what we want to learn from the Ohio State defense when I and Austin Ward head out to Big Ten Media Days in Las Vegas next week. We'll be on boots on the ground in Sin City on Monday. The Buckeyes speak on Tuesday. We'll be out there again on Wednesday. Maybe get some Oregon stuff, a couple other teams that we want to talk to. But let's at the end, you can ask me the same question, Mick. From Wednesday and Thursday, who do I want to hear from? The answer will not be Michigan, by the way. Just going to put that out there. First of all, Mick, how are you?
I'm doing great, Spencer. I don't know how much we can talk about it, but we got some good news. I was on Lettermen Row as a site today as we record this, so it's a big win. It's a big setup for us heading into the season. You can join now. Join now $1, and it gets you through the kickoff of the first to the kickoff of the first game. You'll have everything fall camp, everything you need to know. $1 for your first 30-ish days or so. I'm not sure, something along those lines. 30 plus. Big Ten Media Days, fall camp, everything you need. Anything that you would kind of want to test out, test run before we get into the season and really get into the full swing of things, you can learn about in these next couple weeks, and it's all for $1.
$1 until August 30th. That gets you through the quarterback competition. We're going to have offensive line starters solidified. The second safeties position will probably be solidified by then. Defensive line will be sorted out or not sorted out. You'll find out if you pay for that $1 until August 30th. And we can talk about it. It's because Jeremy Birmingham of 10 TV Plus and 97.1 The Fan, he and Austin Show the Beat is a really good show. Go watch that. I hope you watch that and you watch our stuff. But because I think that they can kind of go hand in hand, hat in hat, with each other. Those guys do their thing on YouTube, but Berm's written content and message board content will reside on Lettermen Row. You can get access to that right now, like Mick said. $1 until August 30th gets you all the way up to Go Bucks versus Hook'em. That'll be a lot of fun there. Matthew McConaughey will probably be in the joint. Arch Manning will be there. That means the whole Manning clan will be there. It'll be a lot of fun. And you can get access to Lettermen Row up until that game for $1. So go to lettermenrow.com right now and get that access to Berm's coverage, to Austin's coverage, my coverage, Alex Gleitman's coverage, and last but not least, Mick Walker's coverage. Mick, let's talk defense. What do you want to learn? You're going to be listening in to the Buckeyes as they're out in Vegas. I'll be there asking some questions of the Buckeyes. We've got two defensive players heading out there, and then also Ryan Day. We got Sonny Styles, who will talk. He's going to be a captain of this team. Caleb Downs, who will talk, the best safety in America, the best defensive player potentially in America. And then Ryan Day. Jeremiah Smith might not give us much on the defense. What do you want to hear from the Buckeyes as it pertains to this defense next week when we're out in Vegas?
Yeah, yesterday I mentioned Austin Saraveto as the pivot point on offense. I think Jermaine Matthews kind of has that same characteristic on defense. Just if he's playing in the nickel, what does that mean for a guy like Devin Sanchez, maybe playing as a true freshman at corner? If Bryce West is playing in the nickel or Jermaine Matthews is sticking on the outside, is Bryce West in the nickel? Can maybe Aaron Scott stay on the outside? I think Jermaine Matthews is kind of the inflection point, the pivot point of this whole secondary. And like you mentioned, you've written about it a few different times now because we got to speak with Caleb Downs earlier this week. But who's the other safety is kind of, it just is balancing between Jalen McClain and Malik Hartford. But when it comes to the cornerback position, that nickel position that Jordan Hancock locked down so wonderfully the past 2 years, it's kind of up in the air now. And it really seems like it's between Jermaine Matthews and Bryce West. But if it's Jermaine Matthews, then you have some domino effects on outside and inside stuff. So that's really one thing I want to learn from whether it's Caleb Downs or Ryan J. Just where is Jermaine Matthews in the secondary right now?
Yeah, I talked to we talked to Caleb Downs earlier this week, and then we've just been asking around about it. The nickel position is so important to this defense. The second safety spot is so important, and they've got questions at both of them. So I think those are both valid questions. Is not only with Jermaine Matthews on the outside, but he also is a prime candidate to be an elite nickel. And so if Aaron Scott and if Devin Sanchez can be good enough on the outside, Jermaine Matthews might be able to slide in and play nickel, which alleviates all the concerns. Because then you've got an elite nickel, you've got somebody outside corner who you trust enough to put Jermaine in the nickel, and then your second safety spot by default has, a good starting point because they're going to be playing alongside Caleb Downs. So I think the whole key to this entire defense being maximized, it can still be elite, I think, if it doesn't happen and Jermaine Matthews stays on the outside. But the key to this defense being absolutely maximized might just be whichever safety wins the job alongside Caleb Downs being good. And then either Aaron Scott or Devin Sanchez. You don't even need both of them, but one of them to take a step forward in fall camp and make it so Jermaine Matthews can move inside. That would be, I think, the maximization of this defense. And maybe that's worth asking Ryan Day about out in Vegas on Tuesday when we get out there. But, Jermaine's progress and the way that he's, coming along this offseason alongside Davison Igbinosun, so important. They got to get the penalty issues cleaned up with Davison. Might even be able to ask Ryan about that a little bit. Caleb Downs about, the conversations with Davison this offseason and how they've gone as far as trying to get that stuff cleaned up. So, yeah, that secondary in general, but like you said, more importantly with Jermaine Matthews, I think is a great point to bring up.
Yeah, and like you said, another way I think you could maximize it, and we've heard a lot of Bryce West chatter. You and I are big Bryce West fans personally, and on like what he does on the field. If he just this fall camp takes that nickel spot, just reaches in, grabs it, and says, "I'm going to play the nickel." So then you, like you said, you have Jermaine Matthews, Devin Sanchez, Aaron Scott, Davison Igbinosun that can kind of rotate between two spots at cornerback. So like if Davison Igbinosun is just having a grabby day, you can play Jermaine Matthews and Aaron Scott or Devin Sanchez, or if Jermaine Matthews goes down for some reason, or if one of these guys goes down, you have a good corner rotation if Bryce West is able to step up and say, I'm this team's starting nickel. And that's no shot at Lorenzo Styles because I think he's a very good college football player. But I think if there's if there's an NFL type nickel in Ohio State's secondary room right now, it probably is with Bryce West or even Jermaine Matthews. So that's the secondary talk. Spencer, I know you mentioned it earlier, the defensive line. I don't know if that's where you're going to go, but take us into the front seven because I think that's where there are more known commodities, but there's also a lot of interesting interchangeable pieces around there as well.
Well, I think the big question obviously is going to be a defensive tackle. So let's get that out of the way. We'll talk about that, and then I'll transition into the defensive end and linebackers because I think they go kind of together at this point. And maybe I can even explain why. Defensive tackle, we're going to ask Ryan Day about Edric Houston and Caden McDonald. They're good players. I talked to Caden a little bit at Caleb Downs' event on Monday night. He seems to be in great spirits, ready for a big season. He looks the part too. He looks very good. But it is now on Jason Moore, Tywone Malone, and Will Smith Jr. to take a step forward. If those three don't, it will be squarely on Jarquez Carter to show that he needs to be in the lineup. And if he doesn't, then you've got two defensive tackles that you feel good about and nothing else. That is not a position Ohio State should be in or can afford to be in. It might be the position that they are in if those guys don't take a step forward. But out of that group of four, I expect at least two of them. And that's only a 50% hit rate to take a step needed to be ready. Now, Alex Gleitman, who does a great job helping us out, covering not only recruiting, but a little bit of team coverage as well, said that he heard that Will Smith Jr. looks good. I've heard great things about Jarquez Carter. And until his Ohio State career is over, I will never give up on Jason Moore. I've long said that he's the most, and Ohio State's the defending national champion. It's been 2.5 years since Georgia hoisted the trophy. But you understand what I'm saying when I say the most Georgia-looking defensive lineman in the room. Like, think of those 2021 and 2022 Georgia defensive lines. Jason Moore looks like he belongs there. He looks the part. He just has to play the part. And Larry Johnson said this spring, like, hey, he just hasn't played a lot of football. We need to get him playing football. Once he plays football, we'll see that, and I think he'll be good. Maybe they're on to something there. And I'm not going to give up on him at any point. So defensive tackle is so important for this team. We saw how important it was last year. They were deep at defensive tackle. They were good at defensive tackle. They've got to be great again this year, especially in game one. Texas was replacing 4 offensive line starters. Like, defensive tackle would be critical in that game. So, you just wonder, what's Ryan Day's response going to be when I ask him about defensive line depth on Tuesday?
Yeah, especially because, like, I think Austin posted about it. There, on top of Caleb Downs' event on Monday, there was also a Ronald McDonald House Golf event, I believe, that took place, and Will Smith Jr. was one of the guys there. Like, you can read into that, you can now read into whatever you want, but they're not just typically in the business of sending anybody out to these events. It's typically people that they want to have that are not only good representations, but people that also want to see, because there are also Ohio State fans at these events typically, that they want to see the players that they recognize from Saturdays. And so I think there's an avenue for Will to get on the field. Obviously, there's even a guy like Eric Mensah, who I don't know if he's ever going to be like a stud 1 tech or a 3 tech, but if he can come in and give you 5 to 10, maybe even 15 snaps behind Caden McDonald as your 1 tech or as your nose tech or nose tackles along those lines, that's valuable as well, just because that way you don't have to play Cade McDonald every down. Or when you go to these goal line sets, which Ohio State really excelled in last year, and because Cade McDonald was in the middle, you have another just space eater, big body defensive tackle in there, and Eric Menzel like that. You just need some of these guys, and like you said with Jason Moore, whether that is he becomes a star at 3 technique or whether he's just able to give Edgercuson a break for 10 to 15 snap. Like they need guys that can rotate in. And obviously, like last year, you had Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton, so you didn't need to just rotate guys in. Like those two were workhorses. But overall, I do think Larry Johnson has done a good job of developing defensive tackles year over year. Just sometimes it takes those guys longer because you're playing a man's game in that middle of every snap.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of see how that goes going forward. But like you said, that defensive tackle room, if somebody could step up, whether that is Jarquez Carter as a freshman or a couple older guys, it could be really big for the Buckeyes. And it would allow them to not have to play a defensive end, maybe like a Bo Atkinson or somebody else there and on certain sets, which is another thing that I think you wanted to mention or talk about.
Yeah, I'm very curious about how this defensive line is going to go as it relates to the linebackers. Look, I know for a fact that CJ Hicks is going to play on the edge. He's not a linebacker anymore. He's a defensive end, but he can do some linebacker type things still and help disguise what they're going to do in this defense. Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, Bo Atkinson are true defensive ends. Logan George too. I think that the defensive end group I actually am really starting to come around on based on what I've heard from people. Like they're really excited about Bo Atkinson and the work he's put in this offseason. Obviously, they're excited about Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson as guys who are finally able to take those lead roles after being secondary role players for so long, for 3 years actually. But what intrigues me is, I think CJ Hicks has a chance to be really good as a pass rush specialist who can also do some linebacker-like things. But I think you could probably say the same thing. CJ's obviously a defensive end who can do linebacker things. I think Arvell Reese is a linebacker who can do defensive end things. I think Sonny Styles is a linebacker who can do quite literally everything except play nose tackle. And I honestly wouldn't put it past him to play nose tackle either. Not that he's going to, but like if you told him like, Sonny, you got to play nose for a snap, I think he'd probably do his best. So, it's the most athletic group. And the only like true 100% you only play linebacker in the entire room is probably Peyton Pierce. So like there are so many different things you can do with this defense, and we're not going to get any sort of specific answer from Ryan Day, and we're not going to see anything or hear anything about it until the ball snapped against Texas, what they're going to do defensively with Matt Patricia. But you have to think that Ryan's going to come into media days and be able to talk about how multiple they're going to be able to be and how versatile and athletic they're going to be in the front seven. Because I think that's the name of the game here. If you don't have defensive tackle depth, make up for it with athleticism and be able to exploit some different areas where you can get after not just a passer, but, stop the run in creative ways. I'm really excited to see how it all pans out, but I think we can start to get a glimpse into what it's going to look like from Ryan Day when we talk to him on Tuesday.
Yeah, and obviously I think Ohio State, especially under Jim Knowles, they kind of became this way, and it's just the way football's gone. They want to play a 4-2-5 type of defense where it's 4 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and you mentioned the 2 that will likely be starting, Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles, but is there really much difference if you switch to maybe a slide in a couple of a 3-3-5 where you have like a Caden McDonald in the middle, you have Bo Atkinson and Kenyatta Jackson on the edge, and Peyton Pierce, Sonny Styles, and Arvell Reese at linebacker, but one of Sonny or Arvell walks up to the line of scrimmage. So then you're essentially playing a 4-2-5 again, but one of these three linebackers is now playing like an edge or an outside linebacker rush type. Like there is that level of versatility, and I imagine there's also that level of creativity in Matt Patricia's head. So just seeing how they handle all of that, and like you said, it makes it interesting, especially because there's a lot of depth in this defensive end room. I think, honestly, when you look at the group, like you have the 2 returning guys, you have Bo Atkinson, who you mentioned. I think they're really excited about Logan George. He's another guy that was at Caleb Downs' event on Monday. I believe I saw him walk in. So, like, that's 4 guys that you can trust there. Then you have, like we said, the 3 linebackers. You really only have 2 defensive tackles you feel confident in right now, so you need to get more on the defensive tackles. But defensive end and linebackers, you feel pretty good about both those units, and how they use that to kind of compensate for maybe not always feeling great about defensive tackles is kind of a subplot of all of it.
Yeah, so I mean, like, there's a lot that we can learn, but there's also a lot to like about this group. So, we'll learn a lot from Ryan Day and from these defenders come Tuesday when we talk to him. Anything else as far as Big Ten Media Days not Ohio State related? Because that kind of covers the defense. I think we covered just about the entire defense, to be honest.
Yeah, there's always obviously the underlying thing of what Matt Patricia is going to do or how he's going to look like, but that probably honestly relates more to us talking to Matt Patricia in August after they start fall camp, or even kind of seeing how it looks against Texas. So there's not a lot at this point we can learn about Matt Patricia. There, like you said, you will be there on what Wednesday, that day where Oregon and Penn State. That's kind of the peak, the headliners of that day. Ohio State really gets their own day, being the national championship and being the premier brand in the Big Ten. And then you have Oregon and Penn State and USC and Michigan kind of that last day. So between Oregon, Dan Lanning, kind of whatever happened last season, whether it's the loss in Autzen Stadium, then the blowout in the Rose Bowl, James Franklin kind of loading up this roster, but never being able to beat Ryan Day. Like, are there any things that you want to find out, learn, glean from that second day? Is there anything that you can actually figure out that's productive to how it impacts Ohio State?
So I won't be there on Thursday. So Michigan, USC, somebody else is going to have to deal with that. I'm coming home. Thursday morning, I'll be back home. So, I mean, between PJ Fleck, David Braun, Luke Fickell, whatever, like Fick's under a lot of pressure this year, but that doesn't really, that doesn't really pertain to me trying to cover Ohio State. The last three, though, Dan Lanning, Jed Fish, and James Franklin, I'm intrigued by. James Franklin is going to have to answer questions about handling the pressure of being the favorite, which he never has been. And if he has been the favorite, especially against Ohio State, he's failed epically. So, it's the same song, same dance, different year for James Franklin. He's got to get over the hump this year. That's whatever. Lanning is interesting because he went 1-1 against Ohio State last year, but I think he would trade that Autzen Stadium game in for a win in the Rose Bowl any day of the week. And by the way, they got like pantsed in the Rose Bowl. It wasn't even competitive. So, there's obviously going to be questions about that, but that's in the past at this point, and Dan can kind of deflect and say it's in the past. The one, oddly enough, that I'm really excited to hear from is Jed Fish. Ohio State goes to Washington in the fourth game of the season. I've heard from people who have covered the sport a lot more comprehensively as a whole than I have that Washington is one of the most intimidating places to play in underrated atmospheres. Not only will that be an underrated atmosphere that Ohio State's going to have to contend with, it's going to be either Julian Sand or Lincoln Keenholz, whoever the starter. It's going to be their first career road start. Coming off a bye, yes, but it's the first career road start. And if we're being honest with ourselves and we're rational about this, Ohio State could already have one loss by then. And you don't want to have two losses before October. Like, that's the last thing you want, especially when you have Penn State, Penn State and Michigan both on the schedule still. Like, you just don't want that. And so I'm really intrigued by that Washington matchup. I think Washington's going to be good this year. And even if they're just a decent team, Julian Sand or Lincoln Keenholz' first start on the road out there is going to be a crazy atmosphere. That's going to be tough. And so I'd like to talk to Jed Fish just a little bit about like what he's expecting from that game and maybe write like this might be the pivotal game for Ohio State this year. So maybe you'll see that Lettermen Row on Wednesday. Because other than that, I don't have a lot of intrigue in talking to James Franklin about his expectations that he won't meet again. Or Dan Lanning rehashing the Rose Bowl that he can deflect and just say, oh, we're on to this year. So that's me.
No, I think that's totally fair. Like you said, it's hard for you because there's so much of an Ohio State focus on this stuff. Like, Ohio State is so, at this point, especially coming off a national championship, internally focused on what they have to do. So learning about or what other people have to say, whether Dan Lanning wants to take a pot shot or Sharon Moore wants to victory lap the win in the game, which obviously he has every right to do. Like, none of that ultimately impacts this upcoming season. So while it will, I imagine, end up on the front page of Lettermen Row, whether you write it or I have to write it, like, none of that is something that's super important to learn about this season as much as it is talking to Ryan Day, whether that's on the podium, his podium, even if Spencer gets some time with him like he did last year. Like, there's different things that could happen where we could learn a lot more about Ohio State, but it's still always fun to get out there, and whether it's the press conferences, or I imagine Spencer has some national beat writers, whether it's our on three guys like Andy Staples or Ari Wasserman or Brett McMurphy, who's joined the team. I whenever I went to Big Ten Media Days, I enjoyed seeing those guys. I imagine Spencer will also enjoy just seeing different national names as well.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a good time. I imagine Ari will be there. Ari doesn't miss a trip to Vegas. I don't know if Andy's going. We'll see. I have no clue about Brett. I know Pete Nakos isn't going to be there. We'll see if J.D. Piquel makes the trip. I know he's in Atlanta propagandizing on behalf of the SEC this week, so we'll see if he does the same with the Big Ten. It'll be a good time. I'm looking forward to it. But we're not going to go anywhere until next week. So tomorrow we'll be back here on the Lettermen Row YouTube channel breaking down some recruiting. Mick Walker's going to inform me what's going on with the Bucks and the future Bucks and the not future Bucks. We're going to talk a lot of lately the recruiting misses, some updates to the on 300. Sam Greer gets a big bump. Jameer Brown in the 2027 on 300. Rivals 300. It's a transition period for all of us. I'm still on the on 3 side, Mick, so I'm just trying to transition. My apologies. It is the Rivals 300. Sam Greer gets a big bump there. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Jameer Brown premiering in the Rivals 300, way up at the top of that list, and a lot more tomorrow here on the Lettermen Row YouTube channel. Before we get there, though, you have to go to lettermenrow.com, get your membership $1 until August 30th, $1 all the way through the next month and a half up until Ohio State versus Texas. It's going to be a great time. We'll see you at Big Ten Media Days next week. You'll get coverage of that as well with that $1. Go to lettermenrow.com right now. We'll see you over in the Lettermen Lounge message board. We'll see you on lettermenrow.com. We'll see you guys back here tomorrow for another breakdown of the Buckeyes.